Excuse me. Welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Breen. Hello. This is going to be a bit of a morbid, somber video. It's the top 25 celebrity deaths that personally affected me. Most of these people are going to be movie stars, but some of them are going to be TV personalities or musicians. But death is inevitable. We all have to face it sooner or later. So let's get on with it. Number 25 is Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher is famous for playing Princess Leia in the Star Wars films. Um, when she passed away, I would say I was pretty much ready for it. You know, she had been kind of old and sickly, at the time that we found out she was dying. So I was I was a fan of um, Star Wars, obviously. Um, but I, I think she had a good send off in or not Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi. So, it was a good final role for her, I guess. Number 24 was Leonard Nimoy. Now, while I'm not a big Star Trek fan, um, I was a fan of Leonard Nimoy for other reasons. Most notably, he did the voice of Galvatron in Transformers the movie, which is one of my favorite animated films of all time. But again, he was pretty old when he died, so it wasn't that much of a shock. Number 23 is Betty White. She died either just before or just after she turned 100. I don't remember, but right around that time. Betty White was um, her passing was kind of like a running joke. It was always like, well, every time someone would die, people would comment, Betty White's still alive. Um, I know her from a lot of things. I'm not going to name them all. She was on the Golden Girls, obviously, and she made guest appearances in a lot of B movies and sitcoms over the years. Now, number 22 actually was kind of a shocker for me, but it came in two phases. Number 22 is Christopher Reeves. The first phase was his tragic accident that ended, more or less, his acting career. He is famous for having played Superman um, in the 70s and 80s Superman films by Warner Brothers. Um, he's done other stuff, but when he did finally die, it was kind of like just following his life. It was kind of like, in a way, it was a relief because it was like you knew he wasn't suffering anymore, but it was still like, like holy shit, Superman's dead. Number 21 was a big shock. It was one of those like it took everybody by surprise. No one saw it coming, and you never thought it would happen to him. It was Robin Williams. And again, when you learn the behind the scenes of why he took his life, it makes sense. But the build up to it was just, there was no build up. It was just you woke up one day and he was dead. It was just like total shock, like completely out of the blue. Um, I know Robin Williams mostly from Mrs. Doubtfire and some other movies from the 80s and 90s. He was Popeye in the musical Popeye from like 82, I believe it was. He's been in a bunch of other movies, but he also did the voice of the genie in Disney's Aladdin in 1992. So he's been around for a while. Number 20 was one that I found out he died like quite a bit after he had actually died, and I was just like, "Oh my God, I didn't know he was dead." This is Bob Hoskins. Now I know him mostly from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but he was also Mario in the Super Mario Brothers movie, as well as he had an appearance in Hook, the live action Peter Pan, again with Robin Williams, I forgot to mention. Number 19, I never met him, but I worked with a guy who was friends with him, and we actually knew about his death before it went public. But we weren't at the newspaper where I worked, but we weren't allowed to break the story until his family made it public. And this was Peter Mayhew. Peter Mayhew um, isn't really he wasn't really famous, but he was the man, not really much of an actor per se, but he played Chewbacca in the original Star Wars films. His death was just kind of a shock because I just didn't expect it. It just came out of nowhere. Number 18 is Luke Perry, and this is another one where he isn't even that old, and it was just like, holy shit, if he can die, anyone can die. I knew Luke Perry from the 90s. He was a what you would classify as a teen heartthrob. But he also had a resurgence recently, or more recently, with Riverdale. So it was sort of like his comeback, I guess. Number 17 is one that affected me personally deeply, but again, I knew it was coming. I was prepared for it. Everybody was. We were all just like, waiting for it. And when it happened, it was just like, okay, it happened. It still sucks that it happened. And this was the man himself, Stan Lee. I was not ready for Stan Lee to go, even though, I should have been because dude was old. Number 16 was a shock for me for a lot of reasons. At the time I found out he died, I was working as a television producer of a local newscast, and Regis Philbin um, was one of the TV personalities I grew up with as a kid who inspired me to want to pursue a career in television in the first place. Not so much in front of the camera, but I always knew I wanted to work behind the scenes, for a television station. So I'm grateful I got to, but I was not happy that I had to put a story about his death in my newscast that day because I was not prepared for him to die. Number 15 is another one whom people made jokes about when he died, not at his expense, but just sort of in more in remembrance of him. It was Bob Barker, because he died at 99 years old, which they say he got as close to going to 100 without going over, which is a joke because $1 on The Price is Right. Again, I knew Bob Barker mostly from The Price is Right, but I've seen him here and there other places. Another TV personality that inspired me to want to get into television. Number 14 was a gut punch. It came out of nowhere, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe he's dead. And it is Bob Saget. I mostly knew Bob Saget primarily from as a kid watching him on Full House, and then as an adult hearing his voice on How I Met Your Mother. Now he's done some other stuff, mostly stand-up comedy and some other stuff, appearances and things. But this one I wasn't ready for. When I heard Bob Saget died, I was like, holy shit, no way. I was just like in shock. Number 13 was one I grew up with as a kid. He was one of the wrestlers that got me interested in professional wrestling. And you'll know who he is before I say who he is because he's one of the biggest reasons why I ate so many Slim Jims growing up. It is Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, he was definitely a controversial figure, but his death was still a shock to me. I was just like, whoa. Number 12 actually just happened recently. And when he died, I was just like, oh my God, I forgot about him. But also, like, he was a big part of my childhood, but early childhood. It was Paul Rubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman. Um, I have mixed feelings about Pee Wee Herman, mostly because I did watch um, Pee Wee's Playhouse as a kid, and I did watch um, Pee Wee's Big Adventure, uh, but I was not a fan of his other movies. I didn't like Big Top Pee Wee. I didn't like the Netflix reboot, requel, whatever it was called. And some of his other like one-off appearances were just kind of meh. So I had really forgotten about Paul Rubens or Pee Wee Herman. So when he died, I was like, I guess I was kind of like in shock he was still alive, to be honest. Number 11 is a guy who died when I was a kid and kind of crushed me a little bit because I was a big fan of his movies. And when I found out he was dead, I was like, oh my God, that means there's no more Ernest movies. Um, I forgot the man's name. I apologize for that. So, you know, I was a kid at the time and I didn't, um, I never really, I think it was like Varney, something Varney, but I knew him as Ernest from Ernest Scared Stupid, Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Jail, Ernest Goes to Camp, blah, blah, blah. So this was when I was a kid. So it was sort of like my first, when I was still trying to figure out what death meant, you know. Now we're into the top 10. These ones all really affected me different ways. Number 10 was Lisa Robin Kelly from That 70s Show. I was just in such disbelief that she died, especially how it happened and how suddenly it was. I was just like, oh my God. Um, One, it pretty much put the brakes on me watching That 70s Show. I was just like, no, I can't watch it anymore. Knowing she was dead, and then later other things I found out about other cast members made me go, yeah, you know what, I'm over that show now. But when I heard she died, I was just like really bothered because That 70s Show, for the longest period, was my favorite TV show. I had every season on DVD, and I literally watched multiple episodes of the show every day for at least 15 years. So it was a big part of my life. Number 9 is another one that just came out of nowhere and felt like a gut punch. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's dead. And also, wow, I had like Pee Wee, I had kind of forgot about him because he hadn't done anything since my childhood. But he was a big character on a TV show I grew up with, Saved by the Bell. His name was Dustin Diamond. He played Screech on Saved by the Bell. And just when I found out he died, I had the opposite effect as Lisa Robin Kelly. I had to go back and rewatch every episode of Saved by the Bell. I was just like, no, I've gotta remember Dustin Diamond because Screech was one of my favorite characters on the show. Number 8 is Michael Jackson. I was working in the casino when it happened, and it was just like the whole casino shut down. And casinos don't shut down, but everybody was just like stopped. Everybody literally just stopped and just took a moment to mourn the passing of Michael Jackson. It was just like, like a moment in time where everybody was like in disbelief, like this can't be happening. He was such a phenomenal superstar. Number 7 is Mr. Rogers. I think it was Fred Rogers, but don't quote me on this. I apologize. I knew him from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Again, a show I watched a lot as a kid. And then when I heard he died, I was just like, wow, that's my childhood. Um, and that one really like stuck with me for a long time. Number 6 is one that really made me angry when he died. Not when he died, because I didn't hear about his death until a year after he had already been dead. But I was angry because I hadn't heard about it, because nobody I knew talked about him, because nobody I knew who he was, which is a shame because he was a big part of my childhood. One of my favorite musicians. I don't know his legal name, and I don't need to know it. It's not important. I mean, it's important to some people, obviously, but to me, I knew him as Nate Dogg. Um, he was the voice of my youth. I mean, he was in so many songs. He was all over Doggy Style. He was all over Regulate. Um, he was just like a big part of 90s G-Funk hip hop. And I grew up listening to that stuff. Number five really shook me to my core. I went through all of the stages of grief. I was angry, I was devastated, I was pissed off, I was in mourning, I was sad, and it still leaves a hole in my life because the band broke up after he died and they will never perform again, and that means I will never get to see them live. And it was the one band I always wanted to see live, and it was Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys. I was so devastated the day he died that I went into a mental breakdown that day. My mom was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, no, I am not okay." He was my favorite of the Beastie Boys, and the Beastie Boys was my favorite band of all time. And I'm still not over it to this day. I'm still like, I just don't accept that he died. It just feels unfair. Number four affected me partially because I kind of had a crush on her when I was a teenager, but also because she was young when she died and it was out of nowhere. It was a freak accident, and it was just like, wow. Um, I knew somebody who died that way, and hearing a celebrity die that way, I was like, oh my God, I don't like this. It's Brittany Murphy. Now, Brittany Murphy was not, um, she was famous, she was a celebrity, she was a movie star, but she wasn't like, A-list celebrity, I would say. She did a lot of rom-coms and sitcoms, in her teen years. I knew her from Clueless, and I also knew her in a couple of episodes of Boy Meets World. And she did some movies, but again, they were mostly teen movies and rom-coms. So nothing like great or amazing. But I was just like really hurt when she died. Number three was the first musician whose death ever affected me. Um, I wasn't very old when she died. I was like a teenager, maybe 19 or 20. And I just, again, like the Beastie Boys, it was the end of the band or the group. And I was crushed because I kind of had a crush on her again. And she was my favorite part of the band. She is Lisa Left Eye Lopez from TLC. And every once in a while, I just have to stop and remind myself that she died because I just miss TLC so much. I'm just like, oh my God, I keep forgetting that they're not coming back. And that one really sucks. Number two, I didn't believe it when I heard it. I was literally like, I was checking news sites, I was checking Twitter. I told my girlfriend, I was like, this isn't real, this isn't happening, I don't believe it. I'm still in denial at this moment in time. I've already done a tribute to him. I have action figures of this guy. Um, it was Wyndham Rotunda, WWF or excuse me, WWE superstar Bray Wyatt. And when he died, I didn't want to believe it. I'm still like, even now, several months later, I'm still in shock, still in denial, and still pissed off about it. And the number one celebrity death that affected me so hard, it like changed my life. Like just changed everything. Like, I mean, just so much changed after he died. I bought his book. I stopped watching his show because I just can't watch him anymore. Um, I, he brought me so many good times, good memories, so many laughs. Um, I did a tribute video of him when he died. Um, it's Matthew Perry. I'm still like not okay with him being dead. I cannot watch Friends probably ever again. Um, because he is like the heart and soul of that show. And knowing he's dead, I can't watch that show anymore because it's like, oh my God, it's like I'm getting punched in the gut all over again. I just can't process it. I can't deal with it. Um, these aren't the only celebrities who have died that affected me, but these are the ones that have affected me the most for one reason or another. And, you know, I don't know if I'll ever get over Matthew Perry dying. I just don't think I can ever watch Friends again. And that makes me sad because I literally watched Friends every single day of my life since it was airing on television and reruns on DVD, on streaming, since the 90s. I mean, even to up until the day he died, I was still rewatching Friends. And now I'm just like, I just can't do it anymore. It's just a reminder that life fucking sucks because eventually, for everybody, it comes to an end.